B'tvach, we're learning as a schus for Shleim Filan Chaya Basarach. We're at the Mishnah on Daf Samach Ches Amud Aleph. We're going to be talking about the halachas of Chadash and about the Shtei Halechem and the Eimer. These are the two things. Ketvach, it's the Bar Mitzvah boy. Almost, maybe in 6 months, it's going to be a Bar Mitzvah.
No, not for this guy.
Not 6 months? Okay. Give him a little more time. So, just to remind ourselves of the basics, we start counting the Eimer the night after the first, on the second, we do it on the second, by the second Seder, the second night of Pesach. In Eretz Yisrael, they do it, it's the first night of Chol Hamoed, but it's always on the 16th day of Nisan. And that marks the time at which, when we bring that's because we bring the Menachos Eimer then. And at that point, it becomes mutter to eat grain that's chodash, new grain that grew, that hasn't yet had it becomes aser until the Eimer, if it was grown in the past, in this spring, and it becomes mutter after the Eimer. Then there's a second thing, the Shtei Halechem, the Kivsei Atzeres that brought on Shavuos, and that's matter, the new fruit and grain, as we'll see, to be brought in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a separate date at which the Chadash becomes mutter, first for general use, for Chulin use, and then, which is by the Eimer, that's on the second day of Pesach, and then the day on which it becomes mutter for Kachim, as the Mishnah will explain, is on the Shavuos, when we bring the Kivsei Atzeres and the Shtei Halechem. Zok the Mishnah. Mishakarav Eimer, when the Eimer was brought, that means during the day, the way it was, like we said in the previous Mishnah, the Eimer was cut at night, it was brought to the Beis Hamikdash, and then you did the Tnufa and Hagasha and the Hakrava of the Eimer. Once that was done, once the Avodah was done, Hutter Chadash Miyad. The Chadash becomes mutter. That's at which point anyone's allowed to eat Chadash. They don't have to just keep themselves to eating only Yash, and they can eat the Chadash. Harachaykim mutar mechatzais hayom ulahala. The Rechayk people who are far away, so they don't have a way to know exactly when the carbon Eimer was brought. As soon as it's midday, they can go ahead and eat the Chadash. They don't have to worry anymore because they can assume that Bezdin, as the Gemara, the Mishnah itself would say, that Bezdin is not going to be lazy about it. Mishachar Beis Hamikdash. This is all when the Beis Hamikdash is kind. After the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash, Hiskin Rabbi Yechim and Zakkai, Yechim and Zakkai made a takana she'yoyim hanof, the day of the waving of the Eimer. That was part of the, I guess, a prominent part of the Minchas Eimer was the Tnufa. That day of the waving, Yemenef Kulei Aser. The entire day is Aser to eat Chadash. That means Bizman Hazeh. He said there's a takana that the whole day is Aser. Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda asked on Rabbi Yechim ben Zakkai, why are you saying that there's a takana that it's Aser? It should be Aser midaraisa. Shenemar ad etzem hayom hazeh. As the Gemara will explain, the pasuk of ad etzem hayom hazeh is referring to Bisman that the Beis Hamikdash is not Kayim, and it's saying ad etzem hayom hazeh until the end of that day, ad v'ad bechlal, until that day, until the, according to Yehuda midaraisa, the entire day of the 16th is also to eat the Eimer Bisman hazeh. That's what the pasuk means when it said etzem hayom hazeh. Now the Mishnah goes back to what it was discussing earlier, where we said during the time that Beis Hamikdash is Kayim, when we said it depends on when the Eimer was actually brought, that we said that it's also from the Rechaykim can eat from midday. They could eat from midday because they know Bezin will get to it right away. They probably did it right after Shachris at 7 o'clock in the morning, but we were misaken that they're not going to, by midday they did. Okay. Zok the Gemara. The Gemara is going to go back with the Mishnah sort of like was a little discordant because it goes back and forth talking about. First, it talks about Bisman Beis Hamikdash, where we say that you could eat from the time that the Omer was brought, and if you're not near the Beis Hamikdash, you could do it from midday. Then we skip to Bisman Hazeh, that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said it's takana that you can't eat that entire day, and and Rabbi Yehuda said you can't eat. So Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said Yom Hanof Kulay also, meaning from the morning. As soon as it becomes morning, it's also to eat. You could eat. And Rabbi Yehuda had asked on that, but he said it's midaraisa. Dr. Mara, Rabu Shmuel, the Amrit Shavayu, is manja beis hamikdash kaim oimer mater. Is manja ein beis hamikdash kaim her mizrach mater. Rav and Shmuel say that, like we said at the beginning of the Mishnah, when the beis hamikdash was around, the actual bringing of the oimer was mater the chadash, but bizman hazeh, no beis hamikdash, you're not bringing them in chasaymer anymore. Hey mizrach mater, the morning is mater. As soon as it becomes morning, it becomes mutter. My timer. Where does
So
this come from?
not like Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Yehuda.
Well, we're talking about midaraisa, so we'll get to what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai would say about this.
So didn't Rabbi Yehuda say the whole day, the 16th is also?
That's that right. It's not like Rabbi Yehuda.
Right. No,
Rabbi
definitely
Yehuda
not.
had said that's midaraisa also. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, seemingly, this Gemara will change the meaning of the Mishnah significantly. But at this point, it seems like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai said midaraisa it's mutter, and he was made a takana. The Gemara will explain the reason for the takana later. But Yehuda said it's also midaraisa, but there Rav and Shmuel are saying, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, it was mutter midaraisa from Heyer Mizrach, from the morning, and not from the night before. My timer, Treik soy kroiksivi. There are two psukim. Ksev ad yom aviyacha. The pasuk says that we can read the whole pasuk. You can't eat essentially chadash. Ad etzem hayom hazeh. It says ad etzem hayom hazeh, which we're going to interpret in a minute. Ad haviyachem es karban alekechem, and then it says until you bring the carbon. So since it said ad haviyachem, so that's mashma when the carbon is brought, it becomes mutter. Uksev ad etzem hayom hazeh. It also says until that day. Haketzat. So how do you understand that? Kam bizman shebeis hamikdash kayim. Kam bizman she'ein beis hamikdash kayim. That which we say that it's ad hayaviyachem, until you actually bring the carbon, is when there's a beis hamikdash, and you can bring the carbon. When there's no more bring a beis hamikdash, it's be'etzem hayom hazeh. And Rashi explains ad etzem hayom hazeh means heyer mizrach. It's referring to the etzem hayom hazeh is when the day starts. So as soon as the day starts, at that point it becomes mutter. That's Rav and Shmuel. And then, like we said in the Gemara, like we said in the Mishnah, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai made a takana on that. Rabbi Yehuda disagrees. He says ad etzem hayom hazeh means that he understands that it's asur altogether. That he's going to darshan the psukim different. He said ad etzem hayom hazeh is ad va'ad bechlal, until that day, including that day, until the end of that day, it's asur. That's Rav and Shmuel. Even when the Beis Hamikdash is Kayim, according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, Hey Mizrach Mater. It's really mutter from the morning. What do you do with that which is said ad haviyachem from the time that you bring it? He's saying even Bezman Beis Hamikdash Kayim, Hey Mizrach is Mater. But our Mishnah had said that it starts from the time of the. This is not really relevant to Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai and Rabbi Yehuda immediately. We'll get to that later. But it's the Tana Kama had said that it's b'shas they bring the Eimer, and according to Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish, just saying even b'zman shebeis hamikdash kaim, it's mutter from the morning. In fact, the Marvak Siv ad haviyachem. What do they do with ad haviyachem? Lemitzvah. They would understand. Rabbi Yochanan Reish Lakish would say that our Mishnah that said until the time, they have to wait till the time of the bring of the Omer, that's only lechatchila. But b'diavad, someone could eat chadash even before that, from that morning. In fact, the Gemara, b'shekar v'omer hot chadash miyad, our Mishnah said that it becomes mutter immediately. How could he say that it becomes mutter mehir mezrach? Our Mishnah said it's from the time that you brought the carbon. So tomorrow mitzvah, it's just a mitzvah to wait till then, but b'diavad you could do it even from the morning. In fact, Gemara now again from the Mishnah, Omer hayamate b'Medina, from a different Mishnah, from a brisa. Omer hayamate b'Medina. The Omer would be mate outside of the Beis Hamikdash for chulin that it could be you could eat chadash. Shtei alechem b'mikdash, and the shtei alechem was mate the mimikdash. Correct the Gemara. How could that be? This is talking about b'shas the Beis Hamikdash is kaim, right? Because it's talking about lamikdash. So how could it say ha'omer hiter chadash? I'm sorry, ha'omer hayamate b'Medina. It's talking about b'shas the time the Beis Hamikdash was kaim. According to Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, it should be mutter from Heir Shemesh. So Gemara again, mitzvah. That which it says, Ha'imar hayamate b'Medina means just as a mitzvah, but it was really mutter from the morning. Now the final question is a little more complicated one. The Gemara doesn't really have a response to this. The Mishnah had said, Mishachar Beis Hamikdash, from the time of the Chum in the Beis Hamikdash, Hiskan Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai sheyeh yom hanaf kulei aser. He made a takana that whole day, starting from the morning, is aser to eat chadash. My timer. What's the reason? Meheri yibana Beis Hamikdash, because he's scared that if you allow people to eat during the whole day of the 16th, he's worried they're going to build the Beis Hamikdash. In the previous year, we ate from the morning. Hashanami nechel. They're going to still eat it, even though the Beis Hamikdash is built. And like we said, once the Beis Hamikdash is built, you have to wait for the Omer to actually be brought. They're not going to remember that the previous year there was no Omer, and now it's the Beis Hamikdash is here. They won't realize that now that the Beis Hamikdash is built, you have to wait for the Omer to be matter. That's the reason for the takana of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. And if you'll tell me that this whole din that we said that you have to wait for the Omer is only the mitzvah, mishum mitzvah leikum v'ligzar. How can Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai say that bisman that there's no Beis Hamikdash, it's also to eat the day of the 16th, because we're worried that the Beis Hamikdash will be built, and you come to eat prior to the bringing of the Omer. But if you say that is all just b'di'ah l'chatchila that you have to wait, would you make a takana that now, when there's no Beis Hamikdash, that you have to not eat because maybe you'll come not to be yotzei l'chatchila, the mitzvah? That still doesn't make sense. So this is l'chayra, a final nail. Excuse me. A lot of dust in my house. Final nail in the coffin of the pshat of Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. So Amar Rav Nachman by Yitzchak, he says a different pshat. So they're gonna. It's not the final nail because we're gonna give it a different text. We're gonna have to. Excuse me, sorry. Should have done that the first time I sneezed. Never pays to procrastinate. So they say a different pshat. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is not coming because of a takana, like we said, that ishtoked milah yachalnu v'heir mizrach. We're worried that they're going to come to eat if they build a Beis Hamikdash. He says, Yochanan ben Zakkai, but she's Rabbi Yehuda Amra. He holds like Rabbi Yehuda. We brought Rabbi Yehuda who says that midaraisa, you're not allowed to eat on the 16th. But Etzem Hayom Hazeh refers to the 16th, the whole day of the 16th, not Heir Mizrach of this, not the rising of the sun on the 16th. The Amar Min HaTorah also, Shneimar Etzem Hayom Hazeh, Aditzuma Shel Yom. He says until that day, not from the beginning of the day, but the whole day. Because Savar Ad Va'ad B'chlal, and he says that includes the entire day of the 16th is Asa Midaraisa, even Shaloi Bizman, the Beis Hamikdash. What Well, mikvah polagoleh. Our Mishnah very clearly seemed to indicate that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was arguing with Rabbi Yehuda. Yehuda was coming to disagree with him. The Tanah Mishachar Beis Hamikdash Hiskin Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai Sheyomen Av Kulei Asa Am Rabbi Yehuda V'Alei Min HaTorah Asa. The Mishnah says it's a machlekes. So say that's a miyamazeh. So it's a marna. Yehuda with a katoi. Yehuda mistook the intentions of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. He misunderstood what Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was saying. Who savar Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai midirabanan kamer? He thought Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai thought that it's only asa midirabanan, midiraisa it's mutter and it's only a takana. V'loi midiraisa kamer. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai was really saying that it's asa midiraisa on the 16th. Correcting Mara, how can you say that? By iskin katani. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai himself said it's takana. My hiskin dorish v'hiskin. So the Gemara answers the takana was not a takana because of a chshash. It meant a takana. He made a takana because he darshan the pasuk to show that midaraisa it's us. Zok the Gemara. Reb Papa v'Rav Huna Breder Yeshua achli chodesh beorta de shitzer nagi shifzer. Rav Papa and Rav Huna Breder Yeshua were living in Bavel, and it was not in the time of the Beis Hamikdash, I think, right? Yeah. So it was after the Beis Hamikdash, but they still had to wait. Still had to wait for the Kiddush HaChodesh, whether there was a bezdin in Eretz Yisrael in Yerushalayim that had to determine whether it was a Chodesh Malay or a Chodesh Chassid. So Shavuos is pretty close after the beginning of the month of Sivan. So they didn't know. I'm sorry, no, we're not talking about Chad. We're not talking about Shavuos. We're talking about on Pesach. But they still, even 2 weeks later, they didn't necessarily get the news. So they were noyeg. They would eat Chadash on the night of the 16th, going into the 17th. That means they didn't eat the whole day of the 16th. Kasavri, Chadash b'chutz la'aretz d'Rabbanan. They hold that Chadash in Chutz La'aretz is only a d'Rabbanan. So it was the night of the 16th, which is, they didn't eat for the 16th of Nisan, which is the day of the bringing of the Omer. They hold that the whole Chadash and Chutz La'aretz altogether is only d'Rabbanan. They weren't in Eretz Yisrael. And because of a suffix, we were not misaken like Rabbi Yehuda or like Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. If he held like Rabbi Yehuda, they would make that takana on a d'Rabbanan.
What's the takana on what? Doesn't everybody hold that on the 16th?
No, I'm
in
saying
Eretz Yisrael it's also
the takana of whether you can't eat chadash in the rabbanon of not eating chadash outside of Eretz Yisrael. B'chlal, there was no. The first question is: are they precluded from eating chadash altogether? Which we haven't discussed up until this point in the sugya. So we're talking about in Chutz La'aretz. So they said this whole thing is just a d'Rabbanan that we're eating. They held that midiraisi you can eat chadash the whole year. There's no such thing as waiting for the Omer. There's no such thing as waiting for the 16th.
Are we worried that it's really it wasn't Yantiv? Is that what we're talking about here?
Well, no, it's not Yom Tov. I'm saying whether it's the 15th
No,
or the
meaning
16th.
right.
Which day is it? Until it's the 16th, the
But they
Omer is not
they
mutter.
waited till the end of the 16th, but we worried that it's not. It wasn't the second day of Yantiv. Is that what we're worried about here? Because they
It's not a
didn't.
question of the second day of Yom Tov. It's a question of is it the 16th day of Nisan,
So, I mean, the
or is
15th
it
or the
the
16th.
right?
Okay.
It's a question which day of it has to be the 16th for Chadash to be. So midirabanan the Chamu Mesaken that you can't eat Chadash until the 16th, and on the 16th they held that we pass like Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai's that pshat and Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai that he holds like Rabbi Yehuda that midaraisa you can't eat the whole 16th. But this was all just a suffix of whether the 17th also might really be the 16th. So they weren't worried that azayvite they weren't masakin that you should wait for the whole 17th, a second day because of Sveika the Yoma, You just did the 16th, which was a deraisa had it been in Eretz Yisrael. Since it's only the Rabbanan, they only required that. Rabbanan de Ravashi, achlu betzafra de shivsa, they would eat. They would wait till the following morning, on the morning of the 17th. Kasari chodesh b'chutz la'aretz deraisa. They hold that it's asa b'deraisa. Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai midrabanan kamer. They don't hold like the way we had explained Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai that he's saying like Rabbi Yehuda midiraisa, but rather he was saying eshtake yibana beis hamikdash and it's takanas chachamim. So be'etza midiraisa you're allowed to eat from the morning. So they're not going to be makbid on Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai's takana because of the sveika diyuma. It's still only a sveika diyuma. So sveika diyuma is not going to make us impose the takana of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai to asa the whole day of the possible 17th, because the 17th might be the sveika diyuma, the 16th really. They were not misakin the takana of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai on a suffix, meaning on the sveika diyuma. Amar Ravina, for the final psak, Amrli aim. My mother told me, Avucha lo have a achel chodesh. He would not eat chodesh ela be'orto the shifsa nagi tamnesa. He waited until the night of the 17th. That was already the evening of the 18th. The Savala Rabbi Yehuda, he held like Rabbi Yehuda that it's asa midaraisa shaloi when the Beis Hamikdash is not kayim the entire day of the 16th, and he held and it's aser midaraisa b'chutz laaretz, and v'chayish l'sveika, and therefore he was chayish for the sveika diyuma. So therefore you have to wait all the way till the end of the 17th day, because it might be the 16th.
What does sveika diyuma has to do with it?
Because this is in Bavel, this is before our days, right? Where they literally did not know whether they still had a Bezdin in Eretz Yisrael, and they still would wait for them to decide whether Rosh Chodesh was on the 30th day or the 31st day from the previous month. So if it turned out that it was on the 30th day rather than the 31st, that means what you thought were counting as the 16th was really the 17th already, because the Rosh Chodesh was a day earlier. So therefore they had, on top of all the discussion earlier, we also have the second question of, is this really a full day earlier? So therefore he waited for an extra day to be sure. What if this day it's really the other way around? I'm sorry. If they were ma'aver the Chodesh, so what you're counting as already the 16th is really not yet the 16th, it's only the 15th. So he waited for the 17th, which is the 17th assuming that they were not ma'aver the Chodesh. But if they were ma'aver the Chodesh, then it's only the 16th, and therefore would be aser because of the takana of Rabbi Yochanan Zakkai, so you have to wait for the whole day.
In those 2 weeks from Rosh Chodesh, they wouldn't get a message from Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah. That's the way I understand it. I have to admit I don't know all the details of exactly what the technical suffix was, but they had the suffix of which day it was. Right? They couldn't get there. They couldn't get there. It's just like today. Just like today, you can't, as Dovi well knows, you can't get from Eretz Yisrael to America or from America to Eretz Yisrael. It's not going to take you 2 days. It's going to take you more than 2 weeks. Dovi, you're invited to come stay by us if you need to. If it's too late for your wife to cook, you can come over.
No, we're gonna start this week. We're gonna start with.
You're accepting it. You're accepting that it's not happening.
Yeah.
I feel bad.
I canceled already, so.
There's nothing to do. You can't live. It's very unlikely it would work out, and you can't just keep living with the suffix and just make it harder. I'm sorry for you. I've been there to show up for Pesach many times. It's so nice. Maybe next year we'll all be there, Be'ez Hashem. Or maybe this year even. Okay, next Mishnah. Ha'omer hayamate b'Medina. The Omer would be mater b'Medina, meaning outside of the Beis Hamikdash. All the chulin would be mutter to eat after the Omer was brought on the 16th day of Nisan. U'shtei lechem b'Mikdash. The shtei lechem in Shavuos will be matter for the hakrava of kachim in the Mikdash. Ein mevian menachos ubikurim. You can't bring menachos or any mincha ubikurim, or the new fruit that you have to bring to the Beis Hamikdash and give to the kehanim, or minchas behema, the minchas that come with the oila and the shlamim that you have to bring minchas nesachim along with it. Koydem la'omer, before the omer, right? The omer is asering fruit. It's asering. It's actually asering grain, and therefore you can't bring all these minchas. But prior to the omer, there's still asa to eat from chodesh. Imhevi, pasul, and if you bring before the omer, it's pasul. Koydem l'shtei halechem lo yevi, and before the shtei halechem, you also can't bring these karbanos. Like we said, kachim are not allowed to be brought prior to the havos of the shtei halechem. Imhevi kosher, and if you bring it, it's kosher. So it's only midera. It's only lechatchila, not really lechatchila, but it means b'di'evet. It's kosher if you do eat, if you're makriv kachim prior to the shtei halechem. Even though we said you're not allowed to bring it before the shtei halechem. That's what the shtei halechem is matter.
So where would you bring after the Omer? Like what to do?
Where would you bring what?
It says you can't bring menachos, kaidem Omer, but then
From the chodesh, you have to use yashon.
And then after the Omer,
I'm saying after the Omer, you could still use yashon.
you can use, but you can also use chodesh, right? So
No, you're not allowed to use chodesh because not for karbanos.
Not for kabbanas. So what could you bring?
Yashon.
No, I'm saying
Previous year.
What's the difference? What do we have to tell you? If you can't do it anyways till Shavuos.
Well, we're saying if you do it before Omer, it's pasul. It's b'di'evet no good, as opposed to after
It's just
the
telling
Omer.
you this thing. In other words, after the Omer, it wouldn't be possible. But really, you shouldn't bring it until the Shtei Halechem.
And it's also telling you that before the Omer, it's pasul. It's pasul. Maybe whatever reason it's kosher b'di'evet afterwards. Maybe it's kosher b'di'evet before and also. The Gemara is going to explain why the difference between the two things. Why is it that Kaidem Omer it's even possible b'di'evet, it's entirely possible, and before the Shtei Halechem, it's only Chatchila. It's b'di'evet kosher. All of Amr Lefan of Yehuda ben Nechemya said there's a simple difference. Before the Omer that the Chadash is usher to a hedyet, so that's why it's going to be also b'di'evet pasul if you bring it as a carbon. Once you already opened it, there's a chink in the armor. You open the door a crack that people are allowed to eat it chutz in the fechulin. So therefore, it also is not going to be pasul b'di'evet if you bring it as a carbon. Shosek Reb Tarfon. Reb Tarfon was quiet in response to this. It's not clear whether he was Shosek because he disagreed, or he was Shosek because he didn't want to. He was masking. He was embarrassed that he didn't have an answer. Tzavu Panav Shor Yehuda ben Nechemya. Yehuda ben Nechemya was very gleeful. His face lit up because he said something and he bested Reb Tarfon. Amalei Reb Akiva Yehuda Tzavu Panecha Sheshafta Es Zaken. Tarfon was the zaken of the Amoraim. He says, you're excited that you feel like you bested, that you answered the zaken. T'ma'aniyim tarich yamim. I'm wondering if you're going to have harichas yamim. Sounds like a very extreme thing to say because of it, but I guess he felt it was a lack of kavod chachamim. Amr Rabbi Yehuda Rabbi Loi, oisei aperek paras hapesach. That time was Prasa Pesach. Prasa Pesach is the time, the 2 weeks, according to the Mandam, who says that you start preparing about the Chag for 2 weeks beforehand. So it's called Prasa Pesach, the portion of Pesach. So we just started Prasa Pesach. That's what we're up to now. Kshalisi la'atzaras, when I came to the gathering, Sha'alti Achrav Yehuda ben Nechemia Heichanu. I asked about how this Yehuda ben Nechemia is. V'amuloi nifta v'halachlei. He said, Taka, what Rabbi Kiva said came true because of his lack of regard for this Canaan. Amr Rav Nachman Yitzchak. L'divrei Yehuda ben Nechemia. According to Yehuda ben Nechemia, that the reason why you are b'di'eved yaitza your carbon if you bring it after the Omer before the Shtei Alechem. Nisachim bikurim. Nisachim that are of Rashi says Nisachim bikurim. So miyayin shebikar koidem l'Omer v'krivim ksherim. If someone brought Nisachim of wine, which was bikurim. Bikurim means from the first wine, and you bring it, you make a nesachim of yayin before the Omer, l'chayra kosher, because yayin is not aser before the Omer. Omer applies to tvua. Yayin is not included in the iser of chadash before the Omer. So since according to Nechemia ben Yehuda ben Nechemia, that it depends, the reason for the heter is because once the Omer was brought, then you already started to have a shtickle heter in the tfu, and that's why if you bring a carbon from it afterwards, it's makubal, it's marutza, it's not puzzle. So the yayin, which was never aser al chadash, when you bring that as nesachim, even though it's before the Omer, it should also be mutter. Zok the Gemara, Pshita, Einachanami. L'chayra, that's what do you have to even tell me this? L'chayra, you're right. It does. It's all the same din. If something that is not subject to the iser of chadash, it's not the chadash. You can't eat it before. You can't be eaten for chulin. Should not be b'di'eved. It should be kosher if it's brought as a carbon, even though it's l'chatchil you shouldn't do so. So no. Ma'od the tema hasam who the hotam michlale etzel hadyet. I might say that adarabba, tvua that was really aser became mutter with the bringing of the Omer, so it has a hotam michlale. You could say it became mutter in spite of the fact that it was aser. Aval hacha deloy hotam michlale. This was never aser the yain, so it was never aser. It didn't have a heter. Loy. Maybe on that, it's not going to also be a din that it's going to be kosher b'di'evet. Kamash malon. Kol shechein hacha d'li itzer klal. Adarabba, we look at it, since it was never aser, it certainly is not going to have a psul if you bring it as a carbon. Okay, let's just see a couple of these questions of Rami Bar Chama. Rabbi Chama asks a number of questions, and interspersed between his questions are some other. Rami Bar Chama or Rav Chanan Bar Chama, I think it is, asks a few questions in the middle. But let's see the first question. Boy, Rabbi Bar Chama, Shtei Alechem Ma'ushi Yatiru Shaloi Kasidron. What's the din about Shtei Alechem being matir? If you do right, the Shtei Alechem is matir kachim. The way it normally works is first the tvua becomes hutter b'chulin with the Omer, and then later on becomes also mutter to hektish with the bringing of the Shtei Alechem on Shavuos. What happens if you first the Shtei Alechem was brought and then the Omer? Now the Shtei Alechem is always brought on Shavuos, and the Omer is always brought on Pesach. But what we're going to discuss, and the Gemara is going to explain, we're talking about something that came into existence after the Omer was brought, and therefore it first was subject to the Shtei Alechem, and then afterwards to the Omer. Hechidami, how do you have such a thing? Going to Zarinu Beina Omer l'Shtei Alechem, that something was planted between the Omer and the Shtei Alechem, so it it wasn't around when the Omer was brought. V'cholaf alayu Shtei Alechem, v'Omer, and therefore the first Shtei Alechem applied to it, and then afterwards the Omer. The Shtei Alechem of 1 year, of one Shavuos, and then the following year's Omer, the next Nisan, that's when the Omer applied to it. Certainly, just the Shtei Alechem is not enough to be matir it, because you need the Omer and the Shtei Alechem. But the question is, can it also work if it's in the opposite order? My Kesijan Shari and Shalei Kesijan Loi Shari. Do you say it only works in the proper order or not in the improper order? Dilma Shalei Kesijan Nami Shari. Amar Rabba Toshma. V'im Takar of Minchas Bikurim. The pasuk says you're going to bring up Minchas Bikurim, but Minchas Aimer Akasim B'daber. It's talking about the Minchas Aimer. Meichan ba min asayrin. And where does the Minchas Aimer come from? It comes from barley, not from wheat. Maybe it comes from wheat. So we give a few reasons why. It says by Makas Barad, what was the pasuk? The sa'ira was soft. So v'namar aviv l'dairis, and it says aviv by the Omer. Ma aviv ha'amar Mitzrayim sa'irim, just like the Torah says directly, it says ha'sa'ira aviv in Mitzrayim. So the aviv that it says l'gavi minchas sa'irim is also talking about sa'irim. That's what really is there. So Bikiva Omer matzinu yachid shemevi chaydasa min achitin v'chayvasa min ha'sa'irim. We find a yachid brings his chayva from the chitin. That's talking about what is that talking about? Rashi says no, there's no Rashi, but he brings when he has to bring a minchas chayva, he brings from wheat v'chayvasam min ha'sa'irin, and he also brings from sa'irin. But tzibur shemevin chayvasam min hachitin mevin chayvasam min ha'sa'irin. So the tzibur that brings their chayva from chitin, certainly they're also going to bring their chayva, meaning the minchas aimer, which is their chayva, has to be from sa'irin. And if you're going to say that the minchas aimer comes from chitin, then we're not going to be able to theorize this drasha. We're saying what chayva does the tzibur have that comes from sa'irim? Everything else, all the other menachos, the minchas that come along with the karbanos on the Yom Tovim, all the minchas chayva are all from chitin. That's the second teretz. Davar acher, imata omer ba min hachitin. Another explanation of this: if you'll say that omer comes from chitin, ein shtei halechem bikurim. You're not going to have the shtei halechem that it's going to be that it's ever going to come from something that's new, right? Because you already brought chitin for the Omer. So it says about the shtei lechem is referred to as bikurim from the new crop that it's coming to be mater. Then isa the shtei lechem shaloi kasidron sharian. So that's the Gemara's that's the raya that it must be therefore that the Omer is coming from sa'irim, and that's why the shtei lechem is the first thing from the chitin. Let me see the shtei lechem shaloi kasidron sharian, and if you'll say, I have to figure out how to. It's just not being quiet. V'im isa, the shtei lechem shaloi kasidron sharian. If you'll say that shtei lechem out of order is mutter, mishkachas of the makav oimer mehanach de'eshush koydem l'shtei lechem ubasa oimer de'shtagid v'shtei lechem mehanach de'eshush koydem l'oimer. You can have a way if the shtei lechem can be done with the backwards, where you first brought the shtei lechem and then the omer, and that will apply and be mater something to migdash. So you can have shtei lechem to be the first of the wheat, even though the omer is also coming from chitin. When he's makriv the omer from things that came koydem l'shtei lechem ubasar omer dishtake, that came before the shtei lechem, between during the spheres omer, between Pesach and Shavuos, shtei lechem, and the shtei lechem that's coming now is coming from the other chitim that came koydem omer the hashtu basar shtei lechem dishtake, that came between last Shavuos and this year, and the Pesach of this year. So both of them are coming from wheat, but the shtei lechem is coming from a different year's wheat. So it's still going to be the bikurim. It's still going to be called the new ones of this year. So Gemara, misavers bikurim lepera karminan. When we say bikurim, we don't mean that it's the first one is the one that comes to be matir that thing. Mizbeach ka'amrinan. It means that it's the first thing that's coming to be mutter on the mizbeach. In this case, the case that you just gave, even though it's the Eimer is coming from the previous years, a different vintage of Chita, that's still not gonna. It's still gonna make it that the Shtei Lechem is not gonna be Bikurim if you're gonna bring the Eimer from wheat, because we don't care what it's being matir like we thought before. We care about what's being brought, and Lamaisa you're being matir. You're already matir Chita, so you can't call it Minchas Bikurim when you bring the Shtei Halechem. Okay, we'll stop over here, and we'll continue Bez Hashem tomorrow.